Been thinking a lot about abundance and scarcity in game design. And I think I've been thinking about them a little bit wrong. I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey of how I got here. And trust me, it's interesting. It's going somewhere, but you got to hang with me. So this all started from this talk that I really loved listening to. I've listened to it probably like 5 times now. It's this hour-long speech from this guy, Brian Moriarty, who's a brilliant game designer. He's this like legendary game designer who made some text-based adventures, and he made some of those old great LucasArts point and click adventures. He's really great. He's really awesome. And he teaches now. He lifts his head up every 5 or so years and will show up at like GDC or somebody or somewhere and make a really great talk. That is, I just watch them over and over. They're just like the Bible for me, of game design. And there's so many interesting and smart ideas, and he's a real intellectual power. I'll link to a bunch of them. I'm not going to attempt to rehash them here. You should watch them on your own. But part of what I kept on thinking about with this one, he did this one that I'll link to, which the kind of the main hypothesis or the sort of theme at the center of it was this idea that game designers will often create something that is sort of like awesome and exciting for a player to do. But because it's so awesome and exciting, it sort of like might break the game, or it might be sort of overpowered or like whatever for a conventional game. And so what they end up doing is they become chintzy with it. They basically say, this thing, the thing that the player's so excited about is overwhelming in power. Let's meter it out slowly. Let's really rate limit how much they can do it, how often they can do it, make it cost some currency. So it's like when you as the player do the thing, you do it, but it also kind of is like, it's sort of a bad feeling too, because I only get to do this 5 more times, something like that. And he kind of goes into this impassioned argument about like, if you have something awesome, why not just give it to the player, right? Like just give it to them, be generous, be overwhelming, and bend your game to fit a shape that allows you to be sort of like big and awesome and generous with the thing that is exciting about the game. Don't be chintzy with it. Don't make something cool and then sort of like slowly meter it out in this unsatisfying way. And it really causes you to think differently about game design. Because obviously, if you were to do this with everything, you have like, imagine Monopoly with an unlimited amount of money where you can also buy every property on the first turn. That doesn't really make any sense. That's not a coherent game. It wouldn't be any fun at all. So I have thought about this and internalized this advice a lot, and thought about sort of like how to be generous and big and awesome with the things that you give players. I love to give players this exciting moment of like they stumble upon a card that they think, how could this even work? This is too crazy. If I combine it with this other card, would that even work? And then it just does, and the game doesn't break. Like that's my whole thing. That's what I love the most in game design. And so I took this advice at sort of face value with Canticle. And I think I actually misunderstood a critical part of it. And that's what I'm going to describe now, of kind of how I ended up sort of backpedaling and understanding a little bit more nuance about what that actually means. So in Canticle, the awesome, exciting thing, the superpower I'm trying to give to the player is that there's these relics that you find. You go out and you search these locations, you find these relics that can do these big, extraordinary, unique, funny, memorable, exciting moments, where you end up drowning the golem, where you end up doing these crazy spells that make the golem disappear, where you use these crazy weapons where all of a sudden you do 40 damage at once, which seemed almost impossible at the beginning of the game, right? And it's really memorable. And that's what's part of what's been testing really well, is that people get really excited about it. It's the stuff I get most excited about designing. And it's the stuff that really makes the game the game. It's kind of why the game exists. It's what is fun about this whole game. And I had this kind of thought of like, if I want to lean into this Brian Moriarty way of looking at it, it's like, these are awesome. These are cool. I want players to stumble upon a bunch of them and use all of them in the game. And so I kind of ramped up the volume on everything, where I was like, let's just be as generous and as big as possible. And so what I did was I said on your turn as a player, you're allowed to do a lot. You have it's a very generous action economy. And when you go into a new space, you can go to a lot of new spaces per turn. When you go into a new space, you find all the relics there, right? And you can decide there will be some stuff that takes you in this direction, some stuff that takes you in this direction, but you can kind of choose whatever you want to go. Big like player freedom, lots of actions, lots of freedom, lots of choice between relics. And I even went so far as to say if this is a multiplayer experience, if there's 2 or 3 wanderers looking around, maybe they can even decide. It's a cooperative game. Maybe they can even decide what order they take their turns in. Like that could lead to that sort of player freedom could lead to even more interesting moments where maybe I can set my ally up for a better turn if I take my turn first, and you can like discuss that. So I turned the slider to maximum on everything. I was just like, let's just go big, free, open, generous, everything, right? This didn't work. So the cool, exciting moments were still in the game. They're in there, and people did eventually sort of find them and have some of those cool moments. But because I had ramped up the volume on everything, it actually detracted from the main thing. It made it so that it was less noticeable, these really, really cool moments, because the player turn was a total mess with this much freedom. So, for example, on people's first turn, since the action economy was so generous, they were able to go to every space on the entire board. And when they got there, they were instead of just sort of like searching for a relic, they'd get dumped like 5 relics on them. It's like, oh, you're at the blacksmith. Here's every relic that the blacksmith has. And what that meant was that they go to every single space on the board, reveal all these relics. Suddenly the board is full of them. They feel sort of like cheap and trivial to find because all you have to do is just like move, 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 move. Okay, cool. Now I've seen 20 relics, right? I also only have an inventory slots for like 8 of them. And so 2/3 of what I found is just laying on the ground like trash. And even though those things were pretty exciting, that like things that could lead to really these cool, exciting, emergent moments, they found them so fast and they were forced to discard them that they basically feel like trash, right? And just the player experience now doesn't feel like a wanderer searching. It just feels almost more like you're rifling through a Rolodex of all these things that you could do. It's overwhelming. It's a lot of reading. It's cognitive overload on the first turn of the game. And the action economy was so generous that people were ending their turns early, going like, well, I think I've searched everything and like I can't use any of these actions in a meaningful way until we discover more stuff. So I guess I'm just gonna call it early and we move on. That was the ultimate smell of like, okay, this action economy is way too generous. So in other words, I had overwhelmed them with so much freedom, so much possibility that I had trivialized the act of searching. I trivialized these relics. And as a result, the cool stuff that was in the game was getting sort of lost in the shuffle. And people were not that excited about some of the ones that they found. Other ones they did find, and we had really, really cool moments, which is kind of what I'm doubling down on and redesigning the game around. But it was such an interesting thing to see. I took this sort of Brian Moriarty advice at face value, and it was just like, yeah, let's just go like big, generous, big, 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 no constraints on anything. And it was a huge mess because if you think about it, every game has constraints, right? Even the most sort of abundant games, it's not abundance on all axes, right? You have to decide which dimensions or which axes you want to give abundance on. Because even in his games, like a point and click adventure, you're going to have scarcity in some sense, right? Like you start a point and click adventure, you don't have access to every single room in the game right out of the gate. If you're picking up items, you don't have every item in the game in your inventory at your disposal immediately. That would be a bad player experience. It would be overwhelming, confusing. It's not sort of like curated and carefully thought through. So I guess what I'm realizing is that the point of this talk that he made is not to say, indiscriminately be abundant and just sort of like turn every meter up to 10, right? The point is turn the meter up to 10 on the big awesome, exciting thing that you're actually trying to get the player to experience, which in this case is these like mini missions and mini like relics that I'm like, use this relic in a super powerful way once and get rewarded with victory points, right? That's what I'm shaping my game around. Ramp that up to infinity. But in order for the player to have a sort of coherent and sane experience with those things, I actually need a lot of other constraints, right? So what I did was I simplified the player turn and I made it much shorter. There's actually far fewer actions you can do in a given round. And now there's just more rounds. So you have these kind of shorter, punchier rounds, which feels a lot better. I also, one playtester who is a game designer who's great, he gave me this thought that he was like, when I show up to the blacksmith, it should cost me an action to search. It's like, of course, I don't know why I didn't think of that the first time around, but he was exactly right. And so now when you go somewhere, you have to search because previously, if you could just move around and see everything all at once, the other huge consequence of it is there's no like trade-offs to doing anything. They like you could see everything, you could search everything, you can just pick whatever relics you want. There's no trade-offs, which means that there's no hard decisions to say like, well, okay, I'm on the blacksmith, I'm starting my turn here. Do I want to spend a few actions digging deep and clearing out all the relics are here, or do I want to go broader, check in on more locations, see this new location that the emperor just played, right? That's an interesting decision to make on a given round. And that was totally absent. The abundance was so off the charts that you didn't even have to make those types of decisions, which is a huge problem. So now you spend time searching. It also opens the door for more cool things. Like there's new relics that could make you more efficient at searching. Find 2 relics at once, draw 3 and pick the one you want. It also introduces this like randomness where if there's 5 relics that you could possibly get at the blacksmith, now you don't know which one you're going to get. It's not so predictable. You could play the totally same set of locations twice, which would be pretty unlikely, but actually have pretty different experiences because you're searching and finding different types of things. So by constraining it, by finding sort of these dimensions like the player turn, how much you can do, how much you can move, how much you can search, by identifying those ones, I actually, as sort of like, these are not the sort of like key things that I want to be off the charts abundant. I was able to introduce some more scarcity there that made the player turn a lot cleaner and saner and easier to get through. And it made the entire player experience much more interesting because when you then find the awesome stuff, you really focus on it because now it's like I have this clean, easy, straightforward, simple player turn. And when I find something really, really cool, I'm able to use it in this big and exciting and memorable and unique way. And that's the stuff that this game is really made of. And so I thought that was just a really interesting thing. Took some advice at face value, had to check myself, and then ultimately realized the great advice is still great advice, just a little more nuanced than I thought it was.